Good morning, everybody. What's up and welcome back. If you're new here, I'm Liz, and today we're going to be discussing the final part of our identified and solved. Technically, there are 6 cases I'm going to talk about in this video, but one of them I've already done a video on, actually 2. One for last year's 25 Days of True Crime, and one for this year after they made his identification public. So our first one we're going to talk about today is Joyce Marilyn Myers Summers, or the Christmas Tree Lady. Now, the Christmas Tree Lady was formerly unidentified until her identification on May 11th of 2022. She was found 26 years ago, a little after 9 a.m. by workers on December 18th of 1996. And this was at the Pleasant Valley Memorial Park Cemetery in Annandale, Virginia. Now, her body was found near a section of the cemetery that was just for children and infants. And these workers then, after finding her body, they would call the police. After the police arrived, they noticed that there was a bag over her head that had been secured by tape. She was wearing a red shirt and a sweater, blue pants, and an Eddie Bauer jacket. So, I mean, she was neatly dressed, and just from that, there's very little they can actually go on. So, the reason why she got the name Christmas Tree Lady is because there was an 8-inch Christmas tree near her, and her backpack was also found near her too, near this Christmas tree. So, that's why they kind of dubbed her Christmas Tree Lady. So, her cassette player, or Walkman, some people, well, that was a Walkman or a cassette player. So both versions, she was listening to a cassette. It was found near her, and it said that she was listening to music, but it's unclear whether or not she actually had headphones on underneath the bag while the bag was over her head. There was 2 notes found with her. One said, "Now I lay me down to sleep, soon to drift to eternal deep, and though I die and shall not wake, sleep sweeter will be than this life I forsake." The second one said, "Deceased by my own hand, prefer no autopsy. Please order cremation with funds provided. Thank you, Jane Doe." So there was actually 2 $50 bills that were found with her. One was for the cemetery and the other one was designated for the coroner. The police determined that she did indeed commit suicide via suffocation, and they were unable to identify her. So even though she didn't want an autopsy, as her second note asked for, they performed one anyway. She was around 5 feet in height and believed that she was between the ages of 50 to 70. Toxicology came back showing that she had alcohol and diazepam in her system, and they also hoped that all of this information would help identify her, but they were unable to do so for the time being. That was until January of this year when Othram offered their services and they were able to do DNA sequencing. So in May, Othram discovered that a man, David Meyer, was indeed the brother of the Christmas Tree Lady. And after they were in touch, he saw the drawing of the Jane Doe, but he was unable to really determine whether or not that it was his sister or not. And this is because it had been so long since he actually saw his sister. Now, the last time that Joyce was seen was in 1981 in Arizona. That was 15 years prior to her death, or prior to finding her body. They then would show this picture to his other sister, Chloe, and she said it definitely was Joyce. With the help of a DNA sample from Chloe, they were able to, in fact, identify the Christmas Tree Lady as Joyce Marilyn Myers Summers. They were also unable to link her to any of the graves in the cemetery because it wasn't known if she had children or not, and Chloe didn't know if she had any children or not. Joyce did have a large scar across her stomach, which could have been a C-section scar, but it can't be fully determined whether it was. There is also another theory that Chloe had. Chloe said it's entirely possible that Joyce wanted to die in the children's section at the cemetery due to severe parental abuse that can be permanently damaging to children, and her choosing the children's section was a symbolic note or that belief. Our next case we're going to talk about is that of Lena Reyes Geddes. So Lena Izaguirre Reyes Geddes went missing on April 8th. In 1998 from Austintown, Ohio. So on this day, it was known that she was going to be traveling from Dallas and that she was going to be going to Laredo, but it's unknown whether or not she actually arrived. Her husband also did not report her missing until October. It seems very suspicious why he didn't report her for such a long time, but it will kind of make sense soon, so hold on to that thought. So April 20th of 1998, her body would be discovered off of Route 276, and this is about 40 miles north of Lake Powell, Utah. Just 12 days after she goes missing is when her body would be discovered. She was hit in the head and then wrapped several times with plastic that was then tied with rope and duct tape. She then would be placed inside of a sleeping bag and then wrapped in a carpet, and she would be known for the time being as the Maiden Water victim. She would remain unidentified until November 2018, and that was when the breakthrough in the case happened. This case was closed and then reopened and then taken on by the Utah State Bureau of Investigation. A photo of her was released by the investigators that matched on what was added to the updated missing persons file from Youngstown, Ohio. And this missing persons file from Youngstown, Ohio was that of Lena Izaguirre Reyes Geddes, and she was a resident of Youngstown. So a relative of hers that provided a DNA sample that did indeed lead to her full investigation, or her full identification. So in 2022, they would release who indeed was the killer. Previously, before discovering her killer, the person of interest was a serial killer by the name of Scott Kimball, who is actually serving a 70-year sentence in Colorado. He has one supposed victim and two confirmed victims that he has under his belt. So they, in MO is similar, so they thought that he was her killer. But he was officially ruled out after it was announced in a press conference that Edward Geddes, her husband, was indeed the killer. They were able to match DNA that was found on the rope that was tied around her body. Edward briefly was a suspect at first in his wife's unsolved murder, especially after he failed to report her missing until October of 1998. He was unfortunately found in 2001 after he died via suicide. It's so weird to kind of say that, but he ended up dying via suicide from a self-inflicted gunshot wound in Nevada. So this case officially has been solved as of this year. So the next one on the list was the boy in the box, but I already have covered this case. He is identified as Joseph Augustus Zarelli as of this month. I will link the two videos about him above if you want to go watch that. The Long Beach John Doe of 1978 is our next one we're going to be talking about. So the Long Beach John Doe was only known as such for 40 years. He was found dead on June 3rd of 1978 on the pavement near Division Street and Corona Avenue in Long Beach, California. But just last week, yes, you heard me, last week, he was identified. Using the advanced world of genealogy, they had finally identified this John Doe as 15-year-old Kenneth Nevada Williams. Now, the next step in this case is to actually identify who the killer is, and they announced that it is their next step that they are taking because it's justice that he deserves, which is really touching to read that that's what the police said in their press conference, is that they really want justice to be served for this 15-year-old. I believe they said it was such an injustice that he was unidentified for so long without having his identity, so they feel it's necessary to fully help him, which I find it's very touching when police or anybody that's on a case of a Doe case and they're like, we need to get this done. Come on, we need to get this done. We need to figure out who did this. It's really refreshing to actually hear that. Kenneth was last seen when he ran away from his family's home in La Puente in 1978. But the weird part about it is that he was never reported missing, and there's a chunk of time missing or about his whereabouts between October 27th, 1977 and June 3rd of 1978 when he was found dead. So on October 27th, 1977, that was actually his last day at Fairgrove Academy, which is the school he attended. And in the press conference that the Long Beach police gave, they did ask that if anyone had any information about his whereabouts during this time, to contact the Long Beach Police Department, the Homicide Detail, Missing Persons section, and you can call the number 562-570-7246. Skeletal remains were discovered at an overlook in Gateway, Colorado, by a hunting guide that was just scouting the area in December of 2019. Now, the remains were found with items scattered around it. These items were believed to be personal belongings, but nothing aided in identifying him. They would estimate that this man was between the ages of 30 to 60, about 5'7" to 5'2" in height, and his weight, hair color, and eye color, and hair length were unable to be determined, as well as his cause of death. So right after his discovery, they added him to NamUs as UP62500. That's his identifier name on the NamUs registry. if you wanted to look at his NamUs profile. His remains were then sent to the University of North Texas and the Colorado Bureau of Investigation for identification. They had very few leads to go on, and eventually the case went cold. But that would all change when the Mesa County Coroner's Office had partnered with Othram. They then would be able to establish his identity and use their genome sequencing, and they were able to identify this man as Larry Dean Watts. So Larry Dean Watts, in fact, was reported missing all the way back in 1997. To be exact, after the last time he was seen on June 16th of 1997. He would be missing until 2019. If anyone has any information in regards to Larry Dean Watts, please reach out to the Mesa County Coroner's Office at 970-244-1898, and please use the reference number C19743. So our last one we're going to be talking about is the Owen County Jane Doe of 1988. So in May of 1988, a couple had found an unresponsive woman in a field along Highway 330 when they were on their way to buy a newspaper. They were just walking through this field and they found her. Now, this woman was only wearing a pair of men's dark brown dress socks, and the investigators would determine that she was between the ages of 25 to 40. It's more than likely that she was Caucasian and had dark brown hair. They also believe that she was about 5'5" in height and weighed about 120 pounds. And also, part of her arm was missing. She did have a significant tattoo of the name Stephen on her upper arm, which was then determined to be a stick and poke tattoo. If you don't know what a stick and poke tattoo is, basically it's a stick with a little needle, and somebody has to hit it repeatedly for it to make the proper marking onto your body. It's a very old way of tattooing, and this is a very significant way of tattooing. So I'm really surprised that nobody was able to identify her with this method because of how not normal it is in the United States. Shouldn't say not normal, not widely identified as being, it's not widely identified as being done in the United States. So they did find clothes that were in proximity to the site of her discovery. These clothes were that of a brown nylon blouse, a pair of men's tennis shoes, the winner's choice brand to be exact, and they were size 5.5, a blue bra, and a pair of jeans. They were able to determine that she had been dead for just a few days, and it's more than likely that she was there exposed obviously to the elements for those few days, and that her cause of death was strangulation via homicide. They also believe that she was indeed sexually assaulted. So her fingerprints were collected and ran in government databases, but nothing came of this lead. They also did multiple forensic facial reconstructions to help in the aid of identifying her, but this was unsuccessful as well. These facial reconstructions were then put on her NamUs profile under the name UP101. So in 2022, the Kentucky State Police would then partner with Othram, just like many of the other cases that I've discussed in these last three parts, and they were able to identify the Owen County Jane Doe 1988 of 38-year-old Linda Bennett. Linda Bennett was reported missing in June of 1988 in Columbus, Ohio, and this was not long after her body would be discovered. Unfortunately for us, her case has been completely solved. I bet you're wondering why. Wait, well, what? So the person responsible for her murder is none other than serial killer Samuel Little. So Samuel Little, when he described Linda, he said that she was a hippie woman that he met in a strip bar in Columbus. He said that she was white, short, and had dishwater blonde hair. Linda then asked if he could drive her to Miami, so they then got in the car and he drove. They would stop at Cincinnati before making their way to Covington, Kentucky, and around this area is where she asked him to just let her out. She wanted to get out and she wanted to listen to some music. But after this, he would just continue driving, and he then would drive up a winding hill on a rural path, and this is where he would indeed kill her and just leave her body concealed by the surrounding vegetation. So that, my friends, is the final, technically 6 of identified and solved of 2022. If there's any more cases that would be identified and solved this year, I will put a video up about them, but I hope you guys enjoyed it. Yeah, I'll see you guys tomorrow for my next video.